Hello everyone. In today's video, I bring you a story of transformation that will deeply touch your heart. Let's meet Elias Mercer, a philosophy professor who, in 1997, had a near-death experience that not only challenged his understanding of life and death, but also revealed universal truths that would change his destiny. What he experienced in that critical moment would lead him to a new perspective on existence, the interconnectedness of all things, and the love that transcends everything. Before we begin, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and hit the bell to receive all notifications. Get ready for an intense and surprising journey that will change the way you see the world. My name is Elias Mercer, and what I'm about to share with you is an experience that completely changed the course of my life. It was the year 1997, and I found myself in Portland, Oregon, immersed in a deeply spiritual phase of my personal journey. For years, I had been seeking answers about the purpose of life, trying to understand the connection between the spiritual and the physical. I have always been a curious, questioning person, and this quest for knowledge led me to explore various philosophies and spiritual practices over the years. At that time, I worked as a philosophy professor at a local university. My life was relatively calm and stable, shared with my wife, Lucille, an extraordinary woman who always supported my spiritual quests, even when she didn't completely understand them. We had a comfortable routine, but I felt that something was missing, that there was more to be discovered beyond our everyday reality. It was in this context that something strange began to happen. A feeling of foreboding took hold of me, a sensation that, at the time, I described as my mystical death, although I didn't fully understand what it meant. It was as if an inner voice was warning me, preparing me for something imminent and transformative. I knew that something significant was coming, but I had no idea that the life I knew was about to be completely redefined. This premonition was not something I could explain rationally. It was a deep, almost visceral intuition that accompanied me day and night. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, certain that something was about to happen. I shared these feelings with Lucille, who listened with concern and care, but I confess that even I didn't know how to interpret what I was feeling. In the weeks leading up to the event that would change my life, I noticed subtle shifts in my perception of the world. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds sharper. It was as if my senses were sharpening, preparing me for something beyond my understanding. I remember spending long moments contemplating the sky, the trees, the people around me, feeling a deeper connection with everything that surrounded me. Now looking back, I realized that this premonition was the prelude to an experience that would redefine not only my view of life and death, but also my understanding of the universe and my place in it. What was to come was something that no book, no philosophy, no spiritual practice could have fully prepared me for. It was the beginning of a journey that would take me beyond the limits of what I believed was possible, a journey that would start with what many would call a near-death experience, but for me was a spiritual rebirth. Everything happened on an apparently ordinary night. Lucille and I had just finished dinner and were relaxing in the living room of our home. I felt strangely tired, but I attributed it to the long day of work I had. We were discussing plans for the weekend when suddenly, I began to feel weak. Very weak. It was a sensation I had never experienced before, as if all the energy in my body was being drained away rapidly. I remember looking at Lucille, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. My vision began to darken at the edges, as if a black veil was being pulled over my eyes. My heart, which moments before was beating normally, now seemed to slow down, each beat slower and weaker than the last. It was at that moment that I realized something was terribly wrong. I tried to get up, perhaps in an instinctive attempt to fight against what was happening, but my body wouldn't respond. I felt my legs give way, and in an instant, I collapsed on the living room floor. The last thing I saw before my vision faded completely was Lucille's face, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. And then, something happened that would challenge everything I believed I knew about reality. As my body lay motionless on the floor, I, or rather, my consciousness, seemed to be separating from it. It was as if a gentle but irresistible force was pulling me upward. At first, it was just a feeling of lightness, as if my being were expanding beyond the limits of my physical body. Suddenly, I realized that I was looking at the scene from a completely new perspective. I was on the ceiling of the room, looking down. I saw my own body stretched out on the floor, motionless and pale. Lucille was kneeling beside me, shaking my shoulders, shouting my name with a voice that sounded distant and muffled. At first, I was in shock. How was this possible? I could see everything with remarkable clarity, every detail of the room, the expressions on Lucille's face, even the book I had left open on the coffee table. But I was no longer in my body. It was as if I were an invisible observer, able to see and understand everything that was happening but unable to interact or intervene. I tried to call out to Lucille, to tell her that I was okay, that she didn't need to worry, but no sound came out. There was no mouth to speak, no vocal cords to vibrate. I was pure consciousness, floating free of physical limitations. In that moment, a realization hit me with full force. I was experiencing what many call an out-of-body experience, something I had read about in books, discussed in philosophy classes, but never truly believed to be possible. And there I was, living this experience firsthand. The sensation was indescribable. There was no weight, no pain, no usual limitations of the physical body. It was as if I could perceive everything around me in a completely new way, as if my senses had been expanded to grasp aspects of reality that had previously been invisible to me. As I floated there, observing the scene below, I began to notice something even stranger. The environment around me started to change subtly. The walls of the room seemed to become less solid, as if they were dissolving into a soft mist. And beyond them, I began to glimpse something more, a vast and luminous space that seemed to call to me. It was at that moment that I understood. What I was experiencing was just the beginning. My journey was about to take me far beyond that room, far beyond everything I knew and understood. I was on the brink of something truly extraordinary. At first, I confess I felt an overwhelming panic. Questions flooded my mind. Am I dead? Is this the end? What is happening to me? It was as if my entire being was screaming in confusion and fear. After all, everything I knew, everything that defined my existence, seemed to have been ripped away in the blink of an eye. I looked again at my inert body on the floor, at Lucille desperately beside me, and a wave of sadness and guilt washed over me. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that somehow I was still there, but there was no way to communicate. This helplessness only intensified my initial panic. But then, something extraordinary began to happen. As the seconds, or were they minutes, time seemed distorted, passed, a subtle change started to occur in my consciousness. The fear and anxiety that had dominated me began to dissipate, like mist under the morning sun. In their place, a feeling of peace emerged, so deep, so absolute, that it is difficult to describe in words. It was as if I were being enveloped in a cloak of serenity and understanding. All the panic, all the confusion, simply dissolved into this overwhelming peace. This transition was as surprising as the experience of leaving my body itself. In one moment, I was terrified, struggling against the unknown. In the next, I was engulfed by a calm that transcended anything I had ever experienced in my life. In this state of serenity, I began to perceive things differently. The fear of death, which had always been present at some level in my life, as it is in the lives of so many people, simply vanished. It was replaced by a profound understanding that death was not the end, but a transition to something greater. I looked again at the scene below me, but now with different eyes. Yes, my body was there, motionless, and Lucille was still in despair. But I no longer felt that heart-wrenching anguish. Instead, I was filled with a deep compassion, a love that seemed to extend not just to Lucille but to everything and everyone. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of something larger, something that transcended my individual existence. It was as if I could feel, even if for a brief moment, the interconnectedness of all things. The separation we usually perceive between ourselves and the world around us seemed an illusion. This feeling of peace and unity was so real, so palpable, that it made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. As a philosophy professor, I had spent years discussing theories about the nature of consciousness, about the relationship between mind and body. But nothing in my readings or academic discussions could have prepared me for this direct experience. It was in this state of serenity that I began to understand. What I was experiencing was not just an isolated personal experience. It was a glimpse of something much greater, a broader reality that is usually hidden from us in our daily lives. This peace was not just the absence of fear or anxiety. It was an active, vibrant peace, filled with an energy I had never felt before. It was as if, free from the limitations of the physical body and mental conditioning, I could experience the pure essence of existence. And it was in this state of profound peace that I prepared for the next stage of my journey, for I knew in a way I could not explain that this was just the beginning. Something more was coming, something that would forever change my understanding of the universe and my place in it. As I floated there, observing what seemed to be my physical body, something even deeper and transformative began to happen. The sense of separation between me and the world around me, which had already diminished considerably, now began to disappear completely. It was as if the boundaries that normally define our individual experience were dissolving. I was no longer just Elias Mercer, a man with a personal story, specific memories, and identity. Somehow inexplicably, I was becoming part of something much greater. In that moment, I experienced a sense of unity so profound and encompassing that it is almost impossible to adequately describe with words. It was not just that I was connected to everything. I was everything. Every object in the room, every particle of air, the very light that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. All of it was a part of me, and I was a part of all of it. This experience of unity was not just an abstract concept or a philosophical idea. It was a lived reality, as tangible and real as anything I had ever experienced in my life. In fact, it felt more real than anything I had ever known before. In this expanded state of consciousness, I began to perceive things that are normally beyond our common perception. I could feel the flow of energy permeating everything, the invisible currents connecting all aspects of existence. It was as if I could see the web of life, intricate and beautiful, linking all beings and all things. Time seemed to have no meaning. Past, present, and future appeared to coexist in an eternal now. Memories of my life, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, were no longer linear sequences of events but facets of a timeless and multidimensional existence. In this state of unity, I understood that life, all life, was much more than I had ever imagined. It was not merely a series of biological or chemical events, but an expression of something vast and infinite. I was not just alive, I was life itself, in all its magnitude and mystery. This understanding brought with it a sense of love and compassion that transcended anything I had ever felt before. It was not a love directed at a specific person or thing, but a universal, unconditional love that embraced all existence. It was as if I could feel the heartbeat of the universe, and that heartbeat was pure love. In that moment, all the worries and fears I carried in my daily life seemed insignificant and distant. Anxieties about the future, regrets about the past, all of it dissolved in the vastness of this experience of unity. I understood that these concerns were merely creations of the mind, illusions that keep us trapped in a limited view of reality. As I was immersed in this state of unity, I had profound insights about the nature of existence. I realized that the separation we typically experience between ourselves and others, between humanity and nature, between the observer and the observed, is an illusion created by our limited minds. In truth, everything is a unique and unified expression of the same fundamental energy. This understanding was not merely intellectual but a direct and visceral experience. It was as if every cell of my being vibrated in harmony with the entire cosmos. I felt part of an infinitely greater whole than I could ever have imagined, and at the same time, I realized that this whole was contained within me. In this expanded state of consciousness, the questions that had tormented me for years about the purpose of life, the meaning of existence, the nature of reality, seemed to resolve themselves, not through concrete answers or logical explanations, but through a deep, intuitive understanding that transcended words or rational thought. I understood that the quest for the meaning of life, which had driven me for so long, was itself an expression of that fundamental unity. Every question, every search, every challenge we face in our individual lives is part of a cosmic process of self-discovery and evolution. At the same time, paradoxically, I realized that there was no need to seek or attain anything. Everything was already complete, perfect in its own nature. The journey of life was not about reaching a specific destination, but about awakening to the truth of who we really are, unique and precious expressions of that cosmic unity. As I delved deeper into this experience of unity, I felt as though I were diving into the heart of the mystery of existence. It was a space of pure potentiality, where all possibilities coexisted. In that space, creation and dissolution, birth and death, were merely different aspects of the same eternal process. It was in this state of cosmic union that I began to truly understand what it meant to be alive. Life was not merely the physical existence of an individual body, but an eternal dance of energy and consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms and experiences. This understanding brought with it an indescribable sense of freedom. I realized that, in essence, I was not limited by my physical body, my personal history, or the circumstances of my life. I was, at my deepest nature, as vast and limitless as the universe itself. However, even in this state of expansion and unity, I still maintained a faint awareness of my individual identity. It was as if I could simultaneously experience the vastness of the whole and the uniqueness of my own expression within that whole. This duality, being both one with everything and a unique expression of that unity, was perhaps the most fascinating and mysterious aspect of this experience. While I was immersed in this experience of cosmic unity, something unexpected happened. My attention was suddenly drawn back to the scene unfolding below me. Lucille, my wife, was still there, kneeling beside my inert body. And it was at that moment that I perceived her in a completely new and overwhelming way. Through this expanded consciousness, I could feel Lucille's suffering with an intensity I had never experienced before. It was not merely a distant observation of her anguish. I could feel it as if it were my own. Every tear she shed, every sob that shook her body, reverberated through my being with painful clarity. The expression of despair on her face was more than visual. It was as if I could directly feel the emotional storm raging within her. The fear, the confusion, the pain of possible loss, all of it hit me in waves, cutting through the peace and serenity I had experienced moments before. It was a shocking contrast. While I was immersed in a state of bliss and cosmic understanding, Lucille was trapped in a whirlwind of intense and painful emotions. The disparity between our experiences in that moment was so vast that it was almost disconcerting. I then realized that, despite all the expansion and enlightenment I was experiencing, there was still a deep and unbreakable bond connecting me to Lucille. Our connection, forged through years of love, companionship, and shared experiences, transcended even this extraordinary experience I was living. Her suffering cut through my peace like a sharp knife. It was as if suddenly I was pulled back into the reality of human existence, with all its joys and pains. I understood, in that moment, that no matter how wonderful and transcendent this experience of cosmic unity was, I began to understand love in a new and deeper way. It was not just a personal feeling, but a powerful force that connects us to one another and to the universe as a whole. At the same time, I realized that Lucille's suffering was intrinsically linked to attachment, to the fear of loss, to the idea of separation. From my new perspective, I could clearly see how this attachment, although understandable and deeply human, was also a source of pain. I was overcome by an overwhelming desire to comfort her, to make her understand that, somehow, I was okay, that death was not the end she feared. I wanted to share with her the peace and understanding I had found. But of course, in that state, I had no means to communicate with her. This impossibility of reaching her, of alleviating her suffering, brought forth a new dimension to my own experience. I realized that, no matter how expanded my consciousness was in that moment, no matter how deep my understanding of the unity of all things, I still carried within me the capacity to feel compassion, to deeply care for the well-being of another being. It was at this moment that I began to understand that perhaps there was a greater purpose to my experience. It was not just about my own enlightenment or transcendence, but about how I could use this understanding to make a difference in the world, to alleviate the suffering of others. Looking at Lucille, feeling her pain as if it were my own, I understood that I still had a responsibility, a role to play in the physical world. No matter how wonderful this expanded state of consciousness was, it did not exempt me from my human connections and obligations. This realization was a crucial turning point in my experience. It brought a new balance, a new perspective that integrated the vastness of the cosmos with the intimacy of human relationships. And it was this understanding that would ultimately shape the course of what was to come. It was in that critical moment, hovering between two worlds, the realm of cosmic unity and the physical world with its human joys and pains, that something within me changed profoundly. Observing Lucille's suffering and feeling it resonate through my being, I made a decision that would alter the course of my experience. I realized that I could not remain in that state of cosmic bliss, however peaceful and enlightening it was. I could not simply leave Lucille alone with all that suffering. The connection we shared, the love that bound us, was too powerful to be ignored. This decision was not a rational or logical process. It was not something I carefully weighed, considering pros and cons. It was an instinctive, emotional choice, born out of love and compassion. It was as if every fiber of my being was screaming to return, to comfort Lucille, to relieve her pain. The moment I made this decision, I felt an immediate change. It was as if the entire universe had heard my silent call and was responding. The vast expansion of consciousness I had experienced began to contract, focusing again on a singular point, my individual being. I felt myself being pulled back, as if a magnetic force was drawing me toward my physical body. It was not an unpleasant or forced sensation, but a smooth and natural movement, as if I were following the course of a river returning to the sea. As I approached my body, I began to feel the physical limitations once more. The feeling of lightness and infinite expansion began to give way to a renewed awareness of my physical body. I could feel the weight of my limbs, the beating of my heart, the flow of air in my lungs. And then, in an instant that felt both eternal and infinitesimally brief, I felt that click, the precise moment when my consciousness realigned completely with my physical body. It was like fitting the last piece of a cosmic puzzle, a return to the form I knew so well, but that now felt strangely new and different. In that moment of reconnection, I experienced a cascade of sensations. The universal peace that had enveloped me during my out-of-body experience began to dissipate, giving way to the more intense and immediate sensations of physical existence. I felt my body weak, as if I had undergone an intense trial. But at the same time, there was a vitality pulsing through me, a vibrant reminder that I was alive. Along with the return to physical sensations came an absolute and unwavering certainty. I am not going to die today. It was not a thought based on logic or a rational assessment of my physical condition. It was a deep, intuitive knowledge, as if I had received this information directly from the source of life itself. This certainty brought with it a wave of relief and gratitude. Relief in knowing that I still had time to be with Lucille, time to process and integrate everything I had experienced, time to share my experience with the world, and gratitude, a profound and overwhelming gratitude for life, for every breath, every heartbeat. At the same time, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was a longing for the peace and understanding I had experienced in my expanded state. Part of me ached for that feeling of unity, that direct connection with the cosmos, but there was also a renewed joy in being back, in feeling the warmth of Lucille's body next to mine, in having the opportunity to continue my earthly journey. I realized that my return was not an end, that every moment from then on would be colored and informed by what I had experienced. And so, with my heart full of love, gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose, I opened my eyes, ready to embrace this new phase of my journey. The world around me seemed the same, but the beginning of a new and profound exploration, the journey of living with my feet on the ground and my consciousness expanded to the cosmos. When I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was Lucille's face. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, widened in shock and relief at seeing me conscious. She was gently shaking me, repeatedly asking if I was okay, her voice trembling with emotion. I noticed she was holding the phone in the other hand, clearly ready to call an ambulance. The sight of her in that state, so worried, so scared, touched me deeply. It was a vivid reminder of the love we shared and the reason I had chosen to come back. "I'm okay, dear," I managed to murmur, my voice coming out weaker than I expected. I tried to sit up, but my body still felt heavy and awkward, as if it were relearning to respond to my commands. Lucille immediately dropped the phone and hugged me, sobbing against my chest. I could feel her body shaking, years of tension dissolving in that embrace. I thought I had lost you," she said between sobs. As I hugged her back, I was flooded with a wave of emotions. The love I felt for her seemed even deeper and more meaningful after my experience. I realized that our bond was more than just a earthly connection. It was a reflection of that cosmic unity I had experienced. Our love was a tangible expression of that fundamental interconnectedness that permeates all existence. "It's okay, Lucille," I whispered, stroking her hair. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The words felt inadequate to express everything I was feeling, everything I wanted to share with her. How could I explain the incredible journey I had just experienced? Slowly, Lucille pulled back a bit, her eyes examining my face with a mixture of relief and concern. "What happened, Elias? You just fell. You weren't breathing. I thought—" Her voice faltered, unable to complete the thought. I knew she was still considering calling an ambulance. After all, from her point of view, I had just gone through something potentially very serious, but I had an inexplicable certainty that there was no need for medical intervention. "I know it may sound strange, but trust me when I say that I'm fine," I said, holding her hands in mine. "In fact, I'm more than fine. Something extraordinary happened." Lucille furrowed her brow. "Lucille," I began, choosing my words carefully. "While I was unconscious, I experienced something that completely changed my understanding of life, death, everything." Her eyes widened, a mix of curiosity and concern in her gaze. "You mean, you had a near-death experience?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I think that's what people call it, but it was much more than that. It was like I had touched the very essence of the universe." I began to tell her about my experience, the feeling of leaving my body, the deep peace that enveloped me, the experience of unity with everything that exists. I spoke of how I could feel her suffering and how it brought me back. As I spoke, I saw a range of emotions pass across Lucille's face: incredulity, fascination, and then gradually, a kind of reverent understanding. She had always been a practical person, skeptical of things she couldn't see or touch, but there was something in my voice, perhaps in my eyes, that made her listen with an open mind. I know it must be hard to believe, I said after finishing my account. But I want you to know that it was real, Lucille, more real than anything I've ever experienced. She was silent for a long moment, processing everything I had said. Then, to my surprise, she smiled softly. You know, she said, on any other day, I'd probably think you hit your head or something, but there's something different about you, Elias. Your eyes, they look deeper somehow. I felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Lucille might not fully understand what I had experienced, but she believed me, and that meant everything. What happened to you? She continued. Sounds incredible, scary, but incredible, and I'm so grateful that you came back to me. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. I pulled her into another embrace, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, the comforting solidity of her presence. In that moment, I understood that my journey was not just about what I had experienced in the realm beyond physical life. It was also about bringing that experience back, about integrating this new understanding into my daily life and the relationships I valued. I love you, Lucille, I said, my voice filled with emotion. And I promise that I will share all of this with you. We will explore together what this means. She nodded against my chest. I love you too, Elias, and I'm here with you no matter what happens. As we stood there embraced, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for life, for love, for the opportunity to experience both the vastness of the cosmos and the intimacy of a human connection. I knew that the days ahead would be filled with discovery and integration, as I learned to live with one foot in the physical world and the other in the realm of expanded consciousness that I had experienced. And so, with Lucille by my side, I began to take the first steps into this new phase of my journey, eager to see where it would lead me. As I was sharing my experience with Lucille, I realized there was so much more to tell, details that were returning to my memory in waves. One of the most intriguing and mysterious parts of my journey was passing through what I can only describe as different layers of consciousness. There's something else, Lucille, I began, feeling the need to share this crucial part of my experience. While I was out of my body, I felt as if I were moving through different dimensions or levels of reality. Lucille shifted, her eyes fixed on me with renewed interest. What do you mean by different dimensions? I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to recapture the feeling. It was as if each layer contained a different truth about life, about existence. Each level brought a deeper, more expansive understanding. I began to describe how, in one of those levels, I experienced a panoramic view of my life. It was not just a repetition of memories. It was as if I could feel the collective consciousness of humanity. Lucille listened intently, occasionally asking questions that helped me articulate better what I had experienced. For a past life, you mean like reincarnation? I nodded slowly. I know it sounds incredible, and honestly, I don't know how to interpret it, but it was so vivid, so real as anything else I experienced. I closed my eyes again, letting the memory flow. I saw myself as a medieval monk, living in an isolated monastery. I had dedicated my entire life to celibacy and austerity, seeking spiritual enlightenment through the denial of the physical world. As I described this vision, the emotions of that past life flooded over me again. The most impactful part was that I could feel the deep regrets of that monk at the moment of his death. He lamented the life he had failed to live, the experiences he had denied himself in the name of spiritual pursuit. Lucille looked at me with a mixture of fascination and concern. And how did you feel experiencing that? It was intense, I replied, searching for the right words. It was as if I could feel every emotion, every regret as if they were my own. And somehow, I felt they were mine, as if the choices of that life still reverberated in me in some way. I paused, reflecting on the connection between that vision and my current life. You know, Lucille, I think this experience showed me something important. Throughout my life, I have sought spiritual knowledge, often at the expense of more mundane experiences. But now I see that both are important. The physical life, with all its joys and challenges, is as sacred as the spiritual pursuit. Lucille took my hand, squeezing it gently. That explains so much about you, Elias. Your tireless quest for knowledge, your dedication to philosophy. Perhaps it was a way to balance what was left unfinished in that other life. I nodded, feeling a wave of gratitude for her understanding. Exactly. And now, I see that the true challenge is to integrate both aspects, the spiritual and the mundane, to live fully in this world while keeping awareness of something greater. As we reflected on this together, I realized that each layer of consciousness I had experienced had provided me with a piece of the puzzle of existence. The vision of my current life showed me the interconnectedness of all my experiences. The perception of the collective consciousness made me understand our fundamental unity as human beings, and the glimpse of a past life taught me about the necessary balance between the spiritual and the mundane. Lucille, I said, feeling a wave of emotion, this journey through these layers of consciousness has shown me that reality is much vaster and more complex than we ever imagined. But it has also shown me that, in the end, it all comes down to love, compassion, and growth. She smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And that's why you came back, isn't it? To live this understanding, to share it. I nodded, feeling a deep certainty. Yes, I came back to live fully, to love deeply, and to share what I learned. And I am so grateful to have you by my side on this journey. We embraced again, both feeling the weight and beauty of the moment. I knew that the days ahead would be filled with exploration and discovery as I worked to integrate the lessons from each layer of consciousness I had experienced. But with Lucille by my side, and with this new understanding guiding my path, I felt ready to face whatever challenges came. In the days that followed my near-death experience, I found myself immersed in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. It was as if every aspect of my life, from the most mundane tasks to the deepest philosophical questions, had been bathed in a new light, demanding reevaluation and reflection. Lucille, bless her heart, was incredibly patient and understanding during this time. She sensed that I needed time and space to process everything that had happened, and she gave me that without hesitation. I began to write compulsively, trying to capture in words the sensations, thoughts, and revelations I had experienced. Page after page of notebooks filled with my reflections, diagrams, and attempts to articulate the ineffable. It was as if I were trying to translate a cosmic language into human understanding. One of the first things that became clear to me was that what I had experienced transcended any specific religious doctrine. It was not about heaven or hell, not about divine judgment or eternal reward. It was about a universal truth, a connection that unites us all, regardless of our beliefs or backgrounds. This understanding led me to reevaluate my relationship with spirituality and religion. I realized that while religious traditions might offer glimpses of this greater truth, none of them capture it completely. The essence of the divine, I understood, lies beyond any dogma or ritual. At the same time, I began to see connections between my experience and the teachings of various spiritual traditions. The concepts of non-duality in Buddhism, the idea of union with the divine in Christian mysticism, the notion of Brahman in Hinduism, all seemed to point to aspects of reality that I had experienced directly. Another important reflection was on the nature of consciousness. My experience had unequivocally demonstrated that consciousness is not confined to the physical brain. It is something vaster, more fundamental than our individual bodies or minds. This led me to deeply question the materialistic views of mind and consciousness that prevail in much of modern science. I spent many nights discussing these ideas with Lucille. She, with her practical and analytical mind, helped me articulate my thoughts more clearly and coherently. Our discussions often lasted late into the night, exploring the philosophical, scientific, and personal implications of my experience. One of the deepest realizations I had during this period of reflection was about the purpose of life. Before my experience, I viewed life as a quest, for knowledge, for enlightenment, for some kind of ultimate achievement. Now, I understood that life is less about a journey to a specific destination and more about the opportunity for expression and experience. Every moment, every interaction, every challenge, and every joy are unique expressions of universal consciousness experiencing itself through us. There is no need to seek an external purpose or ultimate achievement. The purpose lies in the very act of living, of being. This understanding brought an incredible freedom, but also a profound responsibility. If every moment is sacred, if every experience is an expression of the divine, then how should we live our lives? How could we honor this truth in our daily actions? As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I began to integrate the lessons from my near-death experience into my everyday life. The transformation was deep and encompassing, affecting every aspect of my existence. First and foremost, my relationship with fear, especially the fear of death, changed radically. The certainty I had experienced that consciousness continues beyond physical death dissolved much of the anxiety I used to feel about the end of life. This did not mean that I valued my physical life any less. On the contrary, I appreciated it even more, knowing it was a unique and precious expression of universal consciousness. My perspective on time also changed significantly. While I had often worried about the future or ruminated on the past, I now found myself much more present in the current moment. Each instant seemed to contain an eternity, filled with possibilities and beauty that I had never noticed before. My relationship with Lucille flourished in ways I could never have predicted. The depth of love and connection I experienced during my journey beyond physical life translated into an even greater appreciation for our relationship. Every shared moment, every conversation, every touch felt imbued with a deeper meaning. Professionally, I felt a renewed urgency to share what I had learned. My philosophy classes gained a new dimension as I sought ways to convey to my students not just intellectual concepts, but an experiential understanding of the nature of reality. I also began writing a book, trying to capture my experience and its implications in a way that could touch and transform others. One of the most significant changes was in my relationship with nature and the world around me. The experience of unity I had felt left me with a keen awareness of the interconnectedness of all things. Every tree, every animal, every person I encountered seemed to be a unique and precious expression of the same universal consciousness. This led me to a deeper commitment to environmental preservation and service to others. My spiritual quest also took on a new form. While I had previously sought answers in books, teachers, and spiritual practices, I now found wisdom in every moment of everyday life. The division between the sacred and the profane dissolved, and I began to see all existence as an expression of the divine. However, not everything was easy. There were moments of doubt, times when the intensity of my experience seemed to fade, leaving me to question whether it had all been real. In those moments, Lucille's constant presence and support were invaluable. She gently reminded me of the transformation she had witnessed in me, anchoring me in the truth of my experience. As time passed, I realized that the integration of my near-death experience was not a one-time event, but a continuous process. Each day brought new opportunities to apply what I had learned, to live from that place of expanded understanding. Looking back at that fateful night in 1997, I now see that it was much more than a near-death experience. It was a rebirth, an awakening to a reality vaster and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. The journey that began that night continues to this day. Each moment is an opportunity to dive deeper into the truth I experienced, to live more fully from that place of love, compassion, and expanded consciousness. And so, I conclude this narrative not with a final period, but with an ellipsis. For the story continues, unfolding in every moment, in every breath. Life, I learned, is an infinite mystery, always revealing itself in new ways. And I, like all of us, am both the observer and the participant in this grand cosmic drama. My near-death experience was just the beginning. The true miracle, The real adventure, sire, is life itself, this eternal dance of consciousness and form, of unity and diversity. And in this dance, each of us has a unique and precious role to play. May we all awaken to the beauty and mystery of our true nature, and live our lives as radiant expressions of the love and consciousness that permeate the entire universe. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please like, share your impressions in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch every new video and help us spread this message to as many people as possible. Until next time.